When Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, and the rocks split. This is a day for wondering and asking questions, for pondering, a day of reflection, a day of silence for many, a day of being alone or in conversations with a few, to wonder about who Jesus really is. To wonder about what it meant for that curtain of the temple to be torn from top to bottom and for earthquakes to suddenly hit the region. To consider and reflect and meditate and to ponder. From the beginning of Jesus' life, Mary spent a lot of time pondering what was going on with him and what it meant. And so we are called to spend a lot of time thinking about Jesus and who he is and what his life meant. What was the purpose of those last moments when Jesus died, according to Matthew? The earthquake. Maybe it had to do with God shaking things up and not wanting anything ever to be the same again. We in California would think of earthquakes with a different perspective, wouldn't we? But this earthquake was about what God was going to do new and different. You see, at that moment, humanity had done our worst to crucify Jesus, and what we are soon to discover is God's going to do God's best to raise him from the dead. It's the moment of the worst, moving quickly to the best. And we wonder when that is needed in our lives, when we are facing the worst. It can't get any worse than this. And our desire for God to show up with the best, we wonder what God's going to do. That curtain that was torn from top to bottom was the curtain that was in the Holy of Holies of the temple. It was the curtain that separated God in sheer darkness on normal times from any human being. And when it was rent in two, God was no longer cut off. God was no longer hidden. We no longer had to wonder who God is because we see in Jesus the full expression of who God is. We see that Jesus, willing to die, God is willing to lay down his life for us. That's at the heart of God. God sacrifices for human beings. And we wonder what we're called to do in like-mindedness, to sacrifice ourselves for each other. Jesus shows us that God's love is so great that it literally lives out the words that Jesus spoke on that great last night. There is no greater love for one to lay down their life for another human being. We see that God is completely epitomizing the fullness of love in Jesus. We wonder how that impacts all of our lives. Miroslav Volf is a theologian who teaches at Yale. He used to teach at Fuller Seminary. Miroslav wrote a book that's become relatively famous. It's called Exclusion and Embrace. And one of the great metaphors that Volf refers to in that book is Jesus on the cross. His arms wide spread, as a signal that all people are welcome in the presence of God. None of us, from any background, in any race, in any perspective, any religion, are cut off. Jesus welcomes all, Jew and Gentile of all kinds. What Miroslav Volf understood in that is a Croatian. He was called to openly embrace his enemies, the Chetnians, and the others that had done damage in that area of his life. So think and wonder, where is God inviting you to do what Jesus did? Because Jesus' Spirit comes to us to help us not only to wonder, but to do those gracious acts of embracing people that we might normally want to shut out. And it's hard work. Let us wonder tonight as we continue to reflect in quiet and depart from this place.